In this section, you're going to learn about percent of change. So this is when you have some amount and it increases or decreases, and you want to see by what percent it increased or decreased. Now what you're looking at is the percent of the original and how much the percent of the original increased or decreased. If you are working with these problems, there are several things that you could be looking for. You could be looking for the percent of change, which means the percent of increase or decrease. You could be looking for the original amount, or you could be looking for the new amount. So I'm going to go through several different proportions to help you see how to set these up. So let's look at the first formula. You're going to use this formula whenever you're looking for the percent of change. So that means the percent that something increased or decreased by. So you could elaborate on this formula by saying this is the percent of increase, that up arrow means increase, or decrease. And then this is the amount. The difference is going to be the amount of increase or decrease. Now again, remember that the ideas across from each other in a proportion mean the same thing. This is the percent and this is the actual amount, but they are going to represent the same thing, either of increase or of decrease. 100 is going to represent the original amount, so original will always be across from 100. So that's our first formula. Now this is the same formula, but it's just elaborated upon. So if we have a percent of decrease, we have the percent of decrease over 100 equals the old amount, which is the original, minus the new amount. The old amount minus the new amount will give us the amount of decrease over the original amount. If we have the percent of increase, we're going to take the percent of increase over 100, and that's going to equal the new amount minus the old or original amount, and we're going to put that over the original. Now, what I don't actually think through these two formulas much. What I always think about is you just put percent over 100 equals the difference between the two numbers, and you always do big minus small, over the original, and you'll end up with the right percent, whether it's a percent of increase or percent of decrease. And we'll see some examples in a minute. Actually, let's go ahead and jump to an example. So here we have percent over 100 equals difference over original. Again, this percent is going to be percent of change, the percent of increase or decrease, and this difference is going to be amount of change, the amount of increase or decrease. So in this first example, it says I made an 80 on my last test. I made a 97 on today's test. Find the percent of increase. So our percent of change will be percent of increase. Our amount of change will be amount of increase. So what I'm going to do is I'm solving for the percent of increase. So my x is going to go right here where the percent is. The amount of change is always the difference between the two numbers, big minus little. It doesn't matter which came first, but you always do big minus little, so that's 17. The original is the first thing that happened, looking time-wise. So the first thing that happened was I made an 80 on my test. So here's my proportion. X over 100 equals 97 minus 80, which gave us 17, over our original test score, which is 80. Because what we're trying to figure out here is what percent of 80 gives me 17, my percent of increase. So I just cross-multiply to solve, and I end up with approximately a 21% increase. So I improved my 80 test score by 21% to get a 97. Let's look at another example. This year, a car salesman sold 80 cars. Last year, she sold 90 cars. Find the percent of decrease. So this time we're looking for a percent of decrease. So we're looking for our percent, which is x, and our original amount is how much was sold last year, so that's 80. So we do the big number minus the little. 90 minus 80 is 10. We're trying to figure out what percent of 80 is 10. So again, oh, I'm sorry, I said that backwards, didn't I? Last year, you do always have to read these very carefully. Last year is the original. This year is not the original. So 90 minus 80 is 10. So we have 10 over 90, so there's our proportion. I'm going to cross multiply and solve. 90x equals 100 times 10. Solve by dividing both sides by 90, and x is approximately 11%. So the car salesman sold approximately 11% less cars this year than last year because she went from 90 cars to 80 cars. Therefore, 11% is 10 out of 90, or 10 is 11% of 90. Let's look at another example. There were 100 7th graders last year, and this year there are 98 7th graders. Find the percent of decrease. So last year, I want to make sure I get the original, there were 100 7th graders, and this year there are 98 7th graders. So 100 minus 98 is 2. Well, this one should be pretty easy. We're finding the percent of decrease. Well, it's obviously going to be 2 because 2 out of 100 equals 2 out of 100, so it's going to be 2%. But if you don't believe me, here's the actual proportion. So 2 is 2% of 100. So there are 2% less students this year. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next type of, or the next problems that you'll run into. And this is where you're looking for the original or the new. And you're going to use this formula where the new percent is across from new and 100 is across from the original. And we've actually already done problems like this, like when we talked about finding the tax on an item, that kind of thing, where we added 7%. So what we're going to do here is for percent of decrease, you say 100% minus the decreased percent equals the new percent. And that's how you find your new percent, and that's if you have percent of decrease. This is where they tell you the percent of decrease, and you're trying to find either the new or the original amount. Or they tell you the percent of increase, and you're trying to find the new or the original amount. So you'll say 100% plus the increased percent equals the new percent. So for example, these are the ones where we said like 100% plus 7% equal to 107%. And our new percent was 107%. That's where we added 7% tax. So let's look at a couple of examples like that. 20% more kites flew well this year. 30 kites flew well this year. How many flew well last year? So we're looking for the original. Last year is the original. So that's our X. So if 20% more kites flew well this year, that's going to be 100% plus 20%. So our new percent is 120%. So here's 120%. We're looking for our new amount, our original amount, and we know that our new amount is 30. So 30 kites flew well this year. How many flew well last year? So 120 over 100 equals 30 over X. So we're trying to find 120 of some amount gives us 30. We're trying to find that sum amount. So we cross multiply and solve. X equals 25. So we know that 25 kites flew well last year. Again, remember, you have the new percent across from the new amount, 100 across from original. Let's look at another example. Last year I read 15 books. This year I read 3% less than last year. So for our new percent, we're going to say 100% minus 3%, which is 97%. So we know that our new percent is 97. How many books did I read this year? We're looking for our new amount. Last year is our original, so 15. So we have 97 over 100 equals X over 15. We cross multiply and solve, and we get approximately 14 books that were read last year. Our last example, the calories in a candy bar were reduced by 8% to 414 calories. What was the old amount of calories? Since we're reduced, this is going to be a decrease. So it's 100% minus 8% is going to be 92% for our new percent. So our new percent is 92%. Our new amount is 414. What was the old amount? So we're looking for our original. So here's our proportion, 92 over 100 equals 414 over x. So we're saying 92% of some amount gives us 414. So 92% of the original amount of calories gives us the new amount of calories of 414 calories. We're going to cross multiply and solve, and we get 450 calories. So the candy bar used to have 450 calories. So again, just let's review our formulas. When you don't know the percent, you're going to be using percent over 100 equals difference over original to find the percent of decrease or the percent of increase. When you do know the percent of increase and you're looking for the new or the original, you need to figure out the new percent by subtracting the percent of decrease or the percent of or adding the percent of increase. So that gives you your new percent, and you put that across from new, and then 100 is always across from original.